Hi, members of the community. I wanted to put together this quick video to share an upcoming recommendation for our nominations process that's being presented by SAB to the congregation at our annual meeting on October 10. We're also sending you some accompanying documents that outline all of these details, but sometimes it's easier to listen and hear what we're suggesting rather than trying to wade through the documents yourself. So hopefully this will be a simple video telling you why we're recommending the changes to how we elect our elders and deacons, and allow you to think through it before you vote on it at our congregational meeting. There will also be absentee ballots available as well. So first, let's talk about the history of nominations at the community church. As many of you know, the church was founded in 1902, and for most of the church's history, nominating elders and deacons and electing them was simply done by a popular vote process. There was criteria and eligibility, some similar to what we have now, but for the most part, people were simply elected by popular vote. And that served the church well for the time period that it existed from 1902 to 2001. But during about the time of 2002, the church did a revisioning, discerning where God was calling them next and which leaders the church needed to get them there. And what was decided was that the church wanted to create a nomination system that allowed a more diverse slate of candidates to be nominated and elected to consistory, because as some said, it tended to be similar people serving in those roles over and over again. And so they came up with a system of the congregation nominating people. So 4 nominations, got somebody's name in, and then there was the biblical tradition of casting lots. Names were drawn out of a hat, and then that person was elected to the position of elder or deacon. And that served the church very well for a time. It allowed different voices to have a role on consistory, and it served the church well as the church navigated all sorts of things: new pastor, name change, welcome statement, all sorts of significant work that the church has taken on. But now we find ourselves in a different season where we are recommending a different way to nominate and elect elders and deacons. The idea would be that the congregation leads the process. The congregation would nominate people to serve as elder or deacon based on eligibility. But then we would put together a nominations committee who would review those nominations, who would consider other factors like criteria that the elders give them, and also giftedness for what the congregation needs during the next year or two. And then they would present a single slate of nominees to the congregation at the annual meeting to be voted on and elected. So there's a few reasons that we're suggesting this change. The first is that the current model has often caused confusion and frustration for members. And to be honest and candid, it's been exhausting for staff as well. We've tried sending letters in the mail. We've switched to emails. We've often done follow-up phone calls, but we'll often find scenarios where members, because of busy lives and all sorts of other commitments, don't realize that they've been nominated or that they're eligible. And we'll often have people who late in the process are asking to pull their names. And for some, it's been upsetting that their name was on and then it has to be removed. And as pastors, we've often had people that end up serving out of a sense of obligation, maybe hoping that their name won't get pulled out of the hat. But then when they're on consistory, haven't always had the commitment or energy to serve in the way that we need them to. And so for both members and for staff, especially us pastors, the model hasn't been as productive as it should be, getting the most motivated, energetic, and gifted people to lead us on consistory. Drawing names at random also doesn't fit in that well with our theology. We elect elders and deacons based on an external call. So there's no self-nominations. We believe that you should be called by someone else to a role of leadership in Reformed theology. We also believe in the membership getting to sort of weigh in and vote. And so while some of that happens with our nomination process currently, we'd like all of the congregation to be involved in that election process rather than drawing names out of a hat. It seems to fit better with our theology. Another interesting thing is that members who have often said no may be inclined to say yes with this new model that we're proposing. Think about it. If your name is just one of many that could be randomly selected, and you've got all sorts of other things, you've got family life, work life, other things that are vying for your attention, it sometimes feels easier during certain seasons of life to say, like, no, I don't want my name to be on the list of nominees. But if a group of people, both from the congregation and this small group that is put in place to discern God's will, if they discern that you might be the person that the church needs because of your specific gifts in this specific season of the life of the church, you might be more inclined to say, okay, if others are sensing this, then yes, I'm willing. And I think we could see some people who haven't served in a long time being willing to serve. Another reality is that attendance trends in COVID have changed our relationship. So before COVID, before the pandemic, the reality was, not just for our church, but for most North American churches, average church attendance is 1 to 2 times per month. So think about that. If you're going to church, and there's no shame in this, this is just a reality. If you're going to church 1 or 2 times per month, and somebody else is going 1 or 2 times per month, but on different Sundays than you are, you could have 2 similarly dedicated members going to church who don't even know each other. And that hinders our nominations process because not everybody knows each other well. And now you bring in the pandemic where our church is worshiping some in person, some still online, and that won't change for at least another year or two. We get people who might not be able to nominate others who are very gifted, who they might otherwise nominate. By putting together a nominations committee, this group will be tasked with getting to know every regular attender in the congregation so that we can start understanding who might really have gifts to share that a majority of the congregation might not even know yet. We're also facing the reality that there's just a lower number of eligible or willing members to serve. It's hard to get multiple people on the slate, which is why we're proposing a single slate. It's not to limit the choices of the congregation, but we don't want to get into popularity contests. And we have to face the reality that there's just less people to choose from at this point. And that's okay. It's just a current reality to name. So a single slate would allow us to say, like, here are these gifted people who would be great for the role, and it would not stretch us in finding more people than we can come up with to serve on consistory. We shouldn't jump off a bridge just because everybody else is doing it, but it should be important to note that what we're proposing is the way that most RCA congregations do elections for elders and deacons. So it's not like we're trailblazing here. This is actually just what a lot of other churches have found is the best method. And above all of this, the most important thing I want to call out right now is that the point of this is that through this new method, we'll be able to call members to serve whose gifts will meet the current needs of the church. And that's really the end game or the outcome that we want. We want to get people who have some really unique and special gifts to share that line up with the needs of the church during this current season. So here's the process that we're proposing as well, the timeline and method for how this will work. First, the congregation would nominate elders and deacons from a full list of members. There would be a few exclusions, like we'd make a note if people were already serving on consistory, or if their spouse was serving on consistory, or if they had served on consistory in the last 2 years, so that people aren't nominating people who would immediately be taken off the list. But other than that, it would be a full list of members for the congregation to nominate people to serve as elders and deacons. At that point, the nominations committee will receive the results, and that will hold significant weight in the process. They will honor the congregation's desire for who they think is best fit for these roles. But the nominations committee will enter a discernment process and take in other information as well. They'll receive criteria from the elders about eligibility to serve. They'll get to know everybody in the congregation, to learn gifts and to especially see who those new members are who might be able to really contribute. And then, of course, they'll study scripture and pray and ask for God's Spirit to guide them throughout the process. And then after that, a single slate of nominees will be presented to the congregation for a vote at the annual meeting. Here's how the nominations committee will be made up. The committee members will be the vice president of consistory, that's an elder who is elected by all of consistory. Then there will be a chair of deacons, who is a deacon elected by the deacons. the president of consistory, which is always one of the ministers on staff, the chair of the generosity team, that position is elected by consistory as well, and then a member at large, which is an important piece. This will be elected by the congregation. I'll talk about how that election works in a bit, but what I want to highlight in the nominations committee is that it will not be static. It will be changing from year to year as the different officers change, as the vice president changes, the chair of deacons changes, the member at large will change every year. We believe and we hope through this process that we'll get a diverse group of voices within this committee, and it will lead to a diverse selection of consistory members over the year as well. The member at large, here's the process for how that will work. The congregation will elect the member at large at the annual meeting each year. The member at large will be part of the nominating committee for 1 year. The member at large may not be an active member of consistory or the spouse of a consistory member. Characteristics of the member at large will be wisdom, being slow to speak and quick to listen, one who seeks to build relationships with the others, someone who is trustworthy and is able to hold discussions in confidentiality. The person will embody integrity and spiritual maturity. And the idea is that at the annual meeting, the congregation would elect this person for the coming year. So they would have all year to get to know people and to take this work seriously so that they can be a critical role who is sort of outside the intimate body of consistory to really add an important voice to this discussion. The responsibilities of the nominations committee are this. They will endeavor to get to know every confessing member of the congregation. They'll pray together, asking God's Spirit for guidance. They'll study the roles of elder and deacon as described in the RCA Book of Church Order. They'll seek the knowledge of the Strategic Advisory Board to assess strategic needs for ministry in the coming year, and they'll study Scripture together. As you can see, this committee will have significant responsibility and a weight on their shoulder, and a commission to have the congregation lead them in this process. One of the pieces of feedback that we often hear is, boy, we don't want a power-hungry group of people just sort of picking their own to refill consistory each year. And the idea is not that at all. The idea is to keep this body of people rotating, so fresh faces and fresh voices are on it. And the idea is not to just fill positions of power, but to seriously take the time and to ask God's Spirit to lead them in helping us to figure out which members of the congregation are called during this season of ministry for the community church. And so finally, the recommendation that will be before you at the congregational meeting is this. The Strategic Advisory Board recommends that the congregation adopt the proposed changes to the bylaws of the community and RCA ministry in Ada as prescribed in the document Bylaws, October 2021 revision draft. And of course, we'll need to get classis approval should this pass with a congregational vote. A note that the nominations process is outlined in the bylaws, and any change to the bylaws requires a 2/3 vote of approval by the congregation. So that's what's going on, and that's what we're hoping that you will consider and approve at the annual meeting or via absentee ballot if you're not able to make it. I will say for us as pastors, this feels like a very important next step in the life and ministry of the community church in Ada. For a number of years now, we felt that our current method for nominations just isn't working in the way that serves the church best. So if for some reason there is hesitancy and this doesn't get a 2/3 vote of approval, we'll continue to revise the process until we get something that works. But we've really worked with consistory and with other congregational members to put together a plan that we're excited about, and we hope that you're excited about it as well. If you've got questions in the meantime beforehand, please reach out and ask somebody. We're happy to engage more in the discussion about this. Thanks. Have a great day, and thank you for giving your time to watch this.